Paul Atkins of the SEC just put out a video that is super bullish on crypto. Robert Berry back again, you guys. Let's talk crypto, but before we do that, I want you to take action today if you haven't already. The first thing you need to do is you need to position yourself to have access to this digital asset class. The easiest thing for you to do is to sign up at Coinbase or Binance. Those are the two biggest centralized exchanges. I suggest you do it. They have great videos that can onboard you very, very easily. It takes a few minutes. You can eventually buy with a credit card or link your bank account. I'm not even telling you to buy anything. Just be prepared. You don't want to FOMO when the bull market hits. You want to get in now. Timing the market is a thing. And right now, with the stock market having pumped really high, AI stocks through the roof, that hot ball of money is about to rotate. And we're seeing all sorts of signs that it's going to go into crypto. As we go through Q3 and Q4, I'm going to talk to you more about what I'm seeing out there in the crypto space. Please hit the like and subscribe button so you can get regular updates and my thoughts on where this market is going. Now, before we get to a short video put out by the SEC describing their vision of where we're going, I want to talk to you a little bit about some ways to think about investing in this asset class. Now, I had a comment on a video the other day that effectively was from what you might call a Bitcoin maxi. And I hope you're out there, Bitcoin maxi. Bitcoin maxis, that's a term that people use to describe people who think crypto is only Bitcoin. That is the only thing you should buy. Everything else is, as they like to say, a shit coin. Am I a Bitcoin maxi? Hell no. No. Anybody that's looked in this technology to any degree, anybody that's paying attention to what banks are actually doing, know that Bitcoin is its own thing. It's fine. You want to buy basically a pet rock, a store of wealth, that's all fine and dandy. I'm not really interested. Sure, I have some Bitcoin, but it's not that interesting. Is it going to pump? Probably. Yeah, very, very likely. Bitcoin, you can imagine, likely will at least get somewhere in the neighborhood of the gold market cap, right? And that's somewhere in the neighborhood, I haven't checked in a while, something like 10 trillion. So it's got a ways to go up. That's, maybe a factor of 10 at this point, 10x. Is that going to happen in this bull market? I don't think so. Maybe it will, but after that, it's probably not going to go much further. Bitcoin maxis, go ahead and argue with me in the comments. I'm not interested in that. I'm actually interested in the way this technology is being used for other financial products, and it's endless. It's almost endless. There are new products being created all the time because of what this technology enables. So we need to start digging into what are smart contracts, how can you invest in the space of smart contracts, and what to look for. And I think some simple things at the end of the day are consider how are the various protocols actually performing useful work on blockchains? What kind of revenue are they generating for the protocol? And that's kind of very much how a lot of people look at stocks. There's obviously a lot of other things to consider. So if you want to buy Bitcoin, go for it. It's probably a good idea to have a little bit on the side. Now, why would you even want to buy Bitcoin, you might say, instead of, say, gold? Well, I remind you that gold is thought of as a store of value. The vast majority of gold is not used for industrial uses. It's used for jewelry and making bars of gold that, misers can stuff under their bed, I suppose. But people like gold, they value gold because it's a social construct. Remember, value itself is literally a social construct. There's nothing that really has intrinsic value. Now, you can make some arguments about air, oxygen, or something, like the necessity of these things, but there's even some leeway when you get into food, like what actually has value versus what doesn't. How do you value that? But when we get to something like gold, people value it because they say it has value. That's effectively it. Could we live life without gold? Absolutely. Absolutely. But why would you buy Bitcoin over gold? Well, there's a few things. Bitcoin, you can hold Bitcoin on your own. It's sort of a sovereign, what people like to call a sovereign asset. Gold is a physical asset. Now, you can buy kind of paper versions of owning gold, but there's all sorts of security issues with that. Is it really reliable that your piece of paper, your IOU, is actually going to get you back gold? There's a lot of trust assumptions built into that you actually someday could go to that institution, whoever is the custodian of your physical gold, and you could swap for that. Is that always going to happen? No. In fact, the United States, they went back on that. You used to be able to swap dollars for gold at some point. And I believe I remember correctly, France started to take the US up on that. It was sometime in the mid 20th century. And eventually the US government basically said, no, we're not doing that anymore. And at some point therein, the US dollar became a pure fiat currency, right? So it's not backed by gold by any means. If you ask me what backs the US dollar currency, it's many things. It's obviously complicated, but one of the fundamental things is just the ethos of America and the capitalism of America. People believe in America more than any other country in the world. And so why do we still have the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, even though it's not backed by gold? People believe in the United States. They believe in the US workforce and the worker. Okay, well, so you could own gold, but along those lines, your paper, maybe you can't renew your paper for gold, so maybe you just want to hold on to gold. There was a time in the past, this was early 20th century, where the United States government literally said, we're confiscating personal gold, right? So there are a lot of issues with holding gold. Now, you want to buy gold, fine. Again, I'm not really interested in Bitcoin, but what are the properties that Bitcoin have that are better than gold? Well, it's much more easy to transport. It's literally just ones and zeros, if you will, in kind of the ethereal cyberspace. There's no physical item to hold on to. Now, that leads to lots of questions like, is this thing real, or how do we know how much there is? We'd have to dig down into the weeds of why there are 21 million Bitcoin, why that is quite likely all that there ever will be. You can get into arguments about changing the protocol at a fundamental level. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. If you own gold or other assets, a lot of times it's associated with some kind of trust issuer, like a bank. You can go back through history, recent history, and see many times where the money you thought was yours in the bank is not actually yours. The bank will confiscate or stop you from using that money. This happened in Greece. I don't know, this might have been 10 years ago. You can even look as recent as around 2020 during COVID. There were protests happening in Canada, right? Canada, where people were going, they might have been going to Toronto. I can't remember exactly what city. They were going to protest effectively, and other people that weren't even at the protest, they wanted to support these people. They wanted to send money to them. Well, you know what? The banks didn't allow it to happen. So your money is not really your money. You are literally trusting a bank that you'll be able to access that ability to purchase items, to purchase services and goods. You're relying upon them. Now, Bitcoin, there's no central entity that controls who owns the Bitcoin or who's going to move the Bitcoin. That is one of the base properties of a blockchain. It's decentralized. There's no single player that can control that. Again, you guys out there that know some things, you get into the weeds about 51% attacks and everything, but that's deep in the weeds. So these digital assets have unique properties that have never been really seen before, or at least they enhance security in a way that we couldn't have had before. It's not physical. That's actually a bonus. It doesn't rely upon some central issuer like a bank to move and to have custody over. You own your Bitcoin. You have a private key or a seed phrase, which is typically like 24 words, and that gives you access to those funds. You can move those as you wish, right? You do have to pay the Bitcoin network, some fee for the so-called miners to push that Bitcoin around, but there's definitely a case for owning some Bitcoin. I just think for you guys out there, if you're like me, you come from not much, and Bitcoin, maybe it does a 5x from here. So you got $1,000 out there, you're going to buy $1,000 of Bitcoin. Okay, it goes 5x, now you have $5,000. That's great, but it's you're not retiring off that one, are you? There's a lot of other assets that I think are going to grow much more than Bitcoin. I would say one in particular that I've been bullish on for a long, long time, and it's a bit under the radar because they do not shill. They are just building. They're out there building, and I'm going to get into that over the coming videos. But that's a little introduction, at least to Bitcoin and what some people are thinking about Bitcoin. There's lots of great videos on that. I'm much more interested in, what we used to call crypto utilities, all the things surrounding smart contracts. You see endlessly banks talking about using this. The DTCC. The DTCC is an entity that really effectively owns your stocks. When you buy a stock effectively, by the true letter of the law, you own an IOU, and the DTCC is on the back end, and they're truly the custodian of that stock. They can move things around a bit easier. There's regulatory issues with all that. They're talking about tokenized stocks. They've been talking about it for a long time. And how are they going to do this? We're going to dig into the weeds here again over Q3 and Q4. One thing I want you to think about is blockchain technology is all about security. You have real unique security properties. So you got to think about, where is the attack vector in a blockchain technology? You know where one of those attack vectors is? It's pricing structure. You see, the blockchain is this very closed system. It does not interact with the external world directly. It can't. That's part of why it is so secure. Okay, so here's a real question. If you want to take the stock market and you want to turn it into a tokenized market, which effectively means you're just going to use crypto tokens to represent stocks, then those stocks are going to live on a blockchain. Here's the first question for you to start to think about to get a sense of my bullish thesis and where we're going. How are you going to get external prices onto the blockchain? Prices are determined in the real world, in real markets. There's an attack vector. If you can mess around with prices before they get on the blockchain, that can wreak havoc on these financial instruments, right? The price of something and real price discovery is a fundamental issue. I'm telling you, it's already been solved. It has already been solved. A lot of people don't know about this, but it's already been solved. Okay, so it's a little bit of background. I kind of got off track there with a little bit of Bitcoin talk, and I want to get back to the SEC. Let's go ahead and watch this short video here. And here we go.
When I took office, I pledged to ensure that the United States remains the crypto capital of the world. For too long, issuers and investors had to navigate an activist SEC weaponized against this asset class. The result has been...
What he's talking about here is he's, almost everybody can point their finger at one main person when you're talking about the SEC, and that's Gary Gensler. Okay. He's the former chair of the SEC. I've followed him for a long, long time. He actually taught a blockchain class at MIT. You can probably still find it. MIT has a lot of their classes online for free at MIT OpenCourseWare. You can find Gary there teaching a blockchain class, and you might think, oh, wow, well, that's, he must know a lot about this. Because if you know what's going on in this space and you watch that, you can clearly tell. I mean, he knows a lot more than most people. I'll tell you that, Gary does. But it's clear that he structured that class in a very particular way with a very particular agenda. I mean, that's all I'll say. Let's go back to the video.
Uncertainty and inefficiency, chasing crypto asset innovation outside of the United States. So today, I'm excited to announce that the SEC is taking the most historic step yet to modernize federal securities regulations for crypto assets. The United States must and will lead. Our new rule proposal, Regulation Crypto Assets, will ensure that we do. Now, let me be clear. The SEC continues to support congressional work on the Clarity Act, and we expect to see the bill reach the president's desk. Under our current statutory authority, we are acting.
Okay, he says he expects it to get to the desk. I mean, does he really know or not? Who knows? You can find this video on social media. This is on x.com, and you can watch his whole take on this. But effectively, you're just seeing more and more building of momentum towards all aspects of the entire financial plumbing of the entire world moving towards this technology. To my mind, it's so very obvious. Effectively, we're using most people say mathematical guarantees, but what we're doing is we're making these financial instruments more secure. We're making them more transparent. We're making interactions that were probabilistic. We're moving them towards becoming more deterministic. So there's less litigation of various issues. That's less financial frictions right there. The fact that the blockchain is completely transparent, you can see all transactions, means that regulators are going to love this thing. If we had blockchain technology showing us what was going on in the great financial crisis in 2008, if you could look at the properties of all those mortgage-backed securities, which would be effectively trivial if all of those were held on a blockchain, that whole crisis likely never would have happened, right? We never would have gotten to that point. It would have been plainly obvious the amount of risk that was in the system at that point. So, again, I want to call you to action here. Please go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you can get more updates. I'm going to start talking more about investment thesis, where to go with things. I'm not going to talk too much about Bitcoin. You can go and buy some Bitcoin, but I want to talk about smart contracts. That's where the action is. And I think it's almost endless. We will see all sorts of new financial products being created, all sorts of new ideas that aren't even available today, right? As soon as we get regulatory clarity unleashed in this technology, it's going to explode. I have friends on Wall Street. They've already talked about this stuff being infused. I've seen videos 3 years ago about Fidelity, insider videos at Fidelity, telling those asset managers, you need to prepare. You need to develop a subset of your employees that are focused on blockchain, and it's happening at every single financial institution across the world. You can go overseas. You can see in Asia, they've adopted this much more quickly. And I think the very first piece of adoption, it's huge already. It's so-called stable coins. What is a stable coin? It's a digital representation of the US dollar, right? And why the US dollar? Again, we go back to those earlier arguments that I said about in the video. The world relies upon the US economy. It's the strongest economy in the world. People believe in us. People believe in the work ethic of the United States citizen. That is absolutely fundamental to why we're still a reserve currency. There's certain laws and regulations in the United States that aren't in other places, that you can be a foreign entity and you have legal rights. A lot of other countries, if you're a foreigner, you do not have the same rights as a citizen in that country. That creates a bit of an asymmetry where people are not going to want to invest as much. Now, those asymmetries can lead to some certain problems, and in fact, the fact that the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency, leads to all sorts of interesting issues too. You can look up Triffin's paradox or Triffin's dilemma, talking about how being the reserve currency effectively is going to lead to the hollowing out of the manufacturing sector in the U.S., and that is exactly what happened. I think that paradox was first put out there in the 50s or 60s or something like that, well before manufacturing has left for overseas. We've seen that happen, and there's some attempt to kind of rein that back in. Please go sign up at Coinbase, sign up at Binance. Maybe you have another exchange in your particular country that's going to be easier to access. Those are the two great ones in the Western world that are very regulated. Please like and subscribe. Stay tuned. It's about to hit, you guys. I'll see you next time.